Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to look at this book. So this is what would most people consider a classic. So this is John Irving's The Cider House Rules. I'm more actually familiar with the film, though I did read this book some time ago. It is very, very long. So this is definitely your kids' one subject matter. Abortion runs a lot in this book. There's also death and rape and all sorts of things. This is definitely on the mature side. This is one of the more mature books I've covered, as opposed to my smaller children's books, which I do those, or the various middle school and teenage fiction books and fantasy stuff. This has more mature content. So this is a very interesting book. It is very, very long, as you can see. It is also periodically very different from the film. Sorry, I have a cat problem here. This would be the cat being a problem. Get her up. She is old despite her good, dashing, and very beautiful good looks. The time you guys see this, she'll be 14. She's 13 now. So, back to this book. So, this is interesting. In this book, you're looking at two stories. So, you're looking at the history of Homer Wells. Now, Homer Wells was born in this Maine orphanage, and he was adopted out multiple times, abused, and just nobody got him. Of course, he's an orphan. One of the things they mention is he never cries, so they make him cry because orphans just don't. Nobody's listening because they're orphans. So the babies don't cry. So essentially, Dr. Wilbur Larch, who's a non-religious man in charge of the boys' division of this hospital, basically it's a giant orphanage, takes him on and starts training him in medical science because what else the heck do I do with him? There's various talks of what happens when women can't have an abortion. They die, they get sick. You see how miserable some of them are. It definitely goes into this quite a bit. Then at some point, a couple come, they're not married, and she has an abortion, and Homer decides to leave with them. At this point, he's an adult. So he goes and starts working for the family of this young gentleman who run a apple orchard. And parts of this goes through his life, how eventually he becomes in charge. He works with the African Americans who are transient. They come up in apple picking season and pick the apples, and then they leave on for other places to other work. That's just kind of their temporary hires up here, and he's still in Maine. So, and how Homer's life, and this happens right before the war, he does end up having a relationship with the young woman because her boyfriend, fiance, goes off to war. And it is a very kind of interesting portions of his life. Now, meanwhile, Dr. Larch, there had been a young boy at the orphanage who had breathing issues and died. And Dr. Larch is working on a history of St. Cloud, which is the town they are. And rather than having this boy die, he inserts Homer into this story and literally creates a history of this fictional person based on Homer and having a medical degree and all sorts of things. And so you're following him doing this, you're following Homer's life, what goes on. Eventually, the young man whose family he's working for goes off to war, he gets hurt. Now, in between this, again, he's having a relationship with the fiance. She gets pregnant by Homer. They go to St. Cloud. She does not have an abortion. They bring the baby back. They call him Angel. They pretend and tell everyone that they adopted him from St. Cloud because they don't want anybody to know that he is their biological child. The gentleman whose mother, again, our original gentleman whose family that Homer is working for, comes back. He's been injured. He's now in a wheelchair. Him and his fiance do, in fact, get married. And Homer lives in the house. And it's... Again, and they even lie to Angel. Angel does not. He assumes he was an orphan. Until he reaches about 15, when it's written that Dr. Larch has died, and that he has essentially put forth this character in the name of Homer to basically run St. Cloud. And so Homer and his former lover, girlfriend, tell Angel and everybody, basically, and her husband, again, this is like 15 years later, the truth. Nobody cares. And he goes back to St. Cloud and essentially becomes kind of a doctor. This is very early on. This is just post World War II, in the middle of nowhere in Maine. Nobody really cares as long as you're convincing enough. And Dr. Larch has written this history. And people believe it because he's created the false documents. And they can't really do anything else because the issue is Dr. Larch performs abortions. And nobody else will do it because it's still illegal. But they don't really talk about it. Because again, Dr. Larch, and he's shown this with Wilbur or with Homer, that it's necessary. The other thing that happens why Homer is at the orchard is one of the men rapes his daughter and she gets pregnant, and he does perform an abortion on her. It is found out. That does happen. That is very familiar. That is in the book or in the film. The film makes things a whole lot simpler. They cut out how many times Homer was adopted out. They completely cut out the whole I'm making somebody up in a different name. They just they have Dr. Wilbur Larch pretty much using Homer's real name, and he fakes that Homer can't go to war because he has a heart issue. I don't remember. I think he continues to do that. That is still part of this book. So as far as Homer is concerned, he can't go to war because he has a heart issue. So, and of course then, I think even by then, he needs help. He's there to help run this apple orchard, which again, they simplify because by later times, Homer's in the winter months, he's sleeping in the big house, and he sleeps downstairs with his employers of his employer, which is the mother that is running things. So, and he ends up essentially running the apple orchard for her. And then he continues mostly to continue to do that, even when the official, when she dies and her son comes back with in a wheelchair. So they kind of cut that out of the film, along with some various other things. This is a very interesting book. I have not had a chance to reread it. It is very, very long. I have a 3-year-old. Most of this I'm coming from memory. I read it when I was in high school and by skimming it. There is swear words in this. Again, you have incest. There's a lot of talk about what happens to women and children because there is no right to abortion, which is very prevalent right now. This is being shot in 2022. We are having quite a few problems because Roe v. Wade was overturned and people are having to go to different states to get abortions. So, yeah, it sucks right now in the United States. While various other countries are putting in their constitution that women have the right to have an abortion. Hopefully soon they can fix this stupid problem. But who knows? The Republicans are crazy and they don't really care because they want it states' rights, which they don't. Which essentially they'll just fly their mistresses to places like California to have an abortion. and they are not religious. But this, or people have illegal abortions, which is again what this book really talks about. And then you have dozens and dozens of unwanted children, so who are ending up in these orphanages and can't be readopted out. Again, you see a little bit of what happens with Homer, where he's abused by multiple families and returned before he's like 3. So it's and again, you also have incest. So it's a very interesting book. It's very, very long. I'll read off some of the chapters just so you can see what this is. So I can find them here. So the first chapter is The Boy Belonged to St. Cloud. The Lord's Work, which is again talking about abortions. The Princes of Maine, Kings of New England, which is Dr. Large reading to the children. Young Dr. Wells, which is again talking about Homer and learning to be a doctor. Homer Breaks a Promise, which I believe is him leaving. Ocean View, which is when he goes to the apple orchard before the war. So this is talking about his life in the apple orchard before the war happens. Opportunity Knocks. Over Burma, which I think is letters 15 years. This is time has passed. Breaking the Rules, which is again him going back. So it's a very interesting book. It's very, very long. Author notes here. There's a lot of. This is Breaking the Rules. So this is 561 pages. All right, reading the end of this. But yeah, it's a very, very long book. It's a very, very good book. I wish I had the time to I wish I had the time to reread it. I will probably look for a used copy and add it to my collection. But this is a book, besides being really good fiction-wise, if you're looking at this time period, which is again 1930, well, it probably starts in the 1920s. 1920s, 1930s into the 1940s. So, and 1950s, oddly enough, because again, the war is over and you have 15 years later. So it's a good kind of look at these people's lives. It's, if you're looking at what happens when abortions are illegal, like they are unfortunately in a lot of the United States right now, this really shows you what was going on. Besides women desperate to do anything to have an abortion and killing themselves, or basically Larch doing this. I think he does talk about his own history, and there is a line of shit and get off the pot. Sorry if it's swearing here. But that's basically a woman told him, it's like, stop mulling over this and just get it done. I mean, it's, for Larch, this isn't a religious thing. He's doing the Lord's work in a sense, because otherwise these women are going to kill themselves. Or you're bringing kids into the world that are just going to end up being orphans and stuck in horrible circumstances. It's not, he's not something he's doing because he loves it. He's doing because this is a job and it needs to be done. Performing abortions is something that is needed and necessary, and he's able to do this because he's in the middle of nowhere in Maine and nobody's paying attention. Because again, it's illegal. And women come to him partially because he runs an orphanage. He's a medical person who runs an orphanage. So it's a very, very interesting book. It's very, very long. It's very, very complex. There's very, very character rich. But the main thing running through here is the importance of being able to, what happens when women can't have abortions? What happens with these orphans? Why this is a needed job. And yes, there's the hope, because again, you have Angel, who's born in love. And the interesting story with that. And then of course you have the flip side. You have the father who rapes and molests his daughter, and she needs an abortion because this is not something that should happen. So, and you do get that kind of transient culture And so it's a very, very interesting book. John Irving is a great author, but again, this is a very long, complicated. Youngest, I think, would middle school, unless your kid is really, really good at reading and really, really interested in this type of topic. Don't go, and even middle school is a little young, but again, judging by your child's interest level and their reading comprehension, because this is not an easy book to read. I really do wish I had the time, but it's a 500-page book, and I have a small child, and I have a YouTube channel. That requires me doing a bunch of stuff. So that's the end of this video. I am going to cover the film, and I will do some comparisons similar to what I did here, just because I have a good memory of the book. So if you like what you see, be sure to check out the rest of the channel. I do a lot of younger kid books. This is on the older end. I do not do a lot of these more advanced books right now, particularly since I have a 3-year-old child. So I do have a lot of classics. I do focus a lot more on the younger stuff. I also, particularly here in 2023, and this is going to go into 2024 and possibly from now on, doing a lot of book series. So I've covered the Princess Diaries, I've covered the Guardians of Ga'Hoole. I think by the time you see this, the Ga'Hoole should be done. I'm covering a little bit more Meg Cabot and more Catherine Lasky this year. These are more middle grade fiction and fun. I also cover a lot of children's picture books. I cover films. I do the film book comparisons and some other fun stuff. I do some travel videos and some other stuff that you will find on Wednesdays that will pop up occasionally. But consistently, I do books on Mondays. I do films or media on Fridays, 8 o'clock in the morning, minimum of 2 videos a week. So I'm very, very consistent. So if you like what you see, be sure to check out what I've got and leave a positive comment if you have one. Thank you.